Hi, and welcome to 10 Kids, 2 Docs, Parenting Insights from Pediatrician Moms. I'm Dr. Sylvia Bank.
And I'm Dr. Vivian Carlin. Welcome back.
Welcome back. Our topic today is going to be the tantrum, sometimes called the temper tantrum. What it is like, our description, and our advice on what to do if your child is having a temper tantrum.
Yeah, I feel like this is a great one with ones that we've recently done on gentle parenting. It's sort of like this is the elephant in the room. When the child is throwing a temper tantrum, what do we do? And what does that look like? So yeah, let's take a look at it.
Welcome to the 10 Kids, 2 Docs podcast. Seasoned pediatricians and longtime friends, Sylvia Bank and Vivian Carlin have counseled thousands of parents and are raising 4 and 6 kids respectively. Join these doctor moms as they incorporate fun and their combined wisdom and experience to share parenting insights for anyone looking for practical and trustworthy guidance. Please note that this podcast is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment from your doctor.
In our episode on gentle parenting, we highlighted the importance of keeping calm in order to model behavior for our child during difficult situations. This episode is now going to focus on our children's emotions, sometimes seen as tantrums, and how we handle them. Why don't we start off by kind of describing what the temper tantrum is? Any parent who's been through one obviously knows what it's like, but why don't we just spend a couple of moments describing what it is like? Do you have any stories?
Well, okay, I'll say, as I think back on my experiences as a parent, I come from a place where I have some of my children who almost never threw temper tantrums. And what I mean by that is that if they started to escalate to that point of crying and whining or obviously being very upset, I could swoop in just like is described with gentle parenting and be calm and de-escalate them and ask them, wait, this isn't going to solve anything. Let's talk about it. Like, use your words. Let's talk through what's bothering you. And they would respond so quickly to that. And then we could figure it out. And that would end the tantrum.
Yeah.
I think that if I only had those children, I might think that this worked for everybody, right?
Right.
Because then I have other children who were very prone to throwing tantrums, and that was not going to work.
Right. Yeah. So with my child that was more prone to tantruming, I just want to describe what it looks like.
Yes, please. Yeah.
Like, oftentimes you don't know what the cause is. It's not something that's consistent. Something that causes a tantrum today could be something that would be okay yesterday. So it makes it kind of hard to predict
For sure.
when it comes to a parent. Like, you don't know what's going to happen. Secondly, in the middle of the tantrum, there's often a back and forth. It's not just like, come here and let me hug you, you're emotional. It is like they reject you, but they want you. They're pushing you away, but they want you to be near. They're hugging you and hitting you at the same time. It's this outburst of contradictory, strong emotion.
Yeah.
And
It's like also like, I want you to fix this, but I want nothing to do with you. And I hate everything you're saying. Right?
yes, like it's kind of a maelstrom of contradiction, right? And then there's often physically what it looks like. It's very noisy, right? There's extreme crying, loud crying, sometimes screaming. The child, depending on how old they are, they can be stomping. Sometimes they're on the ground kicking, or they call that falling out.
Yes.
For those parents that have never experienced their child doing that, it is just a mess.
Well, and it draws so much attention. And this is very difficult for parents, particularly for parents who have children like some of mine who are prone to throwing a tantrum. We're out, the situation has changed, it's unfamiliar, there's a change in the routine. This is a setup that there might be a tantrum. And then what am I going to do when I'm in the middle of Sam's Club and
Right.
people are screaming?
Right.
I'm going to be that mom where people are saying, lady, get control of your child.
Right. I mean, it can be very frustrating and embarrassing for parents, right?
Absolutely.
Right.
And sometimes I have to look back on myself and think, gosh, if I had only had my first 2 children who
Mhm.
were not prone to this, who were very calm as toddlers, would I have looked on and been like, well, that person's clearly doing something wrong to let it get to this point? I mean,
Right.
I think I might have. I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah, and I think we've talked about this in previous episodes, the whole judging,
Yeah.
the parents judging of each other. And each child, like we highlight almost in every episode, is individual and different. And I think that our society would be better off and less difficult for parents if there was less judgment that got passed around.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I
Yeah.
hope we can paint a picture here of, if you haven't experienced it, you probably don't appreciate where people are coming from, and that it can be much more difficult than simply saying, stay calm, talk to them calmly about their emotions, and
Right.
de-escalate it that way. Okay,
Absolutely.
but on this idea of public temper tantrum and judgment, this
Okay.
is my story.
Okay.
I had, one child in particular who was very prone to this kind of tantruming or getting upset. And this is my same child that I talked about in Travel with Screens. So if you haven't listened to that, listen to it, and you'll kind of understand the extent to which I am talking about. And I feel comfortable sharing these stories because this child is now in middle school and she has incredible emotional self-regulation. In fact, Eric and I we'll periodically think about our kids with this principle of the squeaky wheel gets the oil. And we want to make sure we're giving everybody the attention they need. And we'll be like, who's the squeaky wheel right now? Like, who is really taking our time and attention? Maybe because we're worried about them, or maybe it's just because they're pursuing something that needs a lot of our time and help.
Right.
And we'll rank order our children between us that way. And this child has sat at the bottom of the list for like a year and a half because
Really?
she's just so happy, loves school, amazing emotional regulation. So I'm going to tell these stories about her now as a sense of hope and how much she's overcome. But at any rate, she was very prone to that, deep feeling, tantruming, crying.
Like sometimes they just cry, right?
Yes, if she didn't get her way, if things did not go how she wanted, if the schedule was changed, the routine was out of whack, whatever it was. And one year when she was 4, we were doing an extended family reunion at Disney World, and our kids hadn't been. And we're like, okay, we're going to go do this. We pre-prepped our children and said, this child is going to cry at least once every day. This is going to be stressful for her. And I can't even tell you what's going to trigger it. Something's going to go wrong and she's going to cry. So just everybody set your expectations. That is
Right.
okay. We're going to let this happen because we want to go do this trip, right? And we could have another talk on what vacations are right for your family and whether or not we should have. But I feel like with our expectations in check, that was fine, right?
Right.
So we're at Disney World and we've all sat down to get some very expensive lunch, right?
Right.
And something happens and she starts crying and Eric is talking to her and she's escalating. And Eric is like, this is what he would do at our house too. He's like, I understand that you're upset and that you need to cry. We need to sit here and eat lunch in a more peaceful manner. I need you to go somewhere else to cry. And he's like,
Right.
if you just walk 10 feet right there to that grass, you can sit there and cry. And as soon as you're done, you can come back and join us. We can talk about it.
Right.
So he banishes her over to this grassy spot outside of the table, and she is screaming, crying.
Okay. Right.
And this woman comes up to Eric and says, what are you doing? This is Disney World. How are you letting your child sit there and cry at Disney World? And he's like, it's okay, I've got it. And she's like, no, you can't do this at Disney World.
Is it an employee of Disney or just a random lady?
Not an employee. It's not.
Okay.
This is just another quote unquote well-meaning mom.
Okay.
Right? And he escalates and he's like, I've got it. I don't need your advice. I know what I'm doing. You can leave. Something like that. And basically this all happens and she goes maybe 15 feet away and just stands there and stares at my child, stares at Eric. And my older kids think this is the funniest thing in the world. And I am horrified. And my 5-year-old says, hey, Mom, I need to go to the bathroom. And I'm like, yes, let's go right now. Get me out of here. I don't want to even witness this. I'm so embarrassed. And I think the point of that is that people will say this, oh, there are other ways to prevent or to stop this tantrum. Have you tried talking to your child about their emotions? Have you tried offering them something else? Have you tried all of these things? And with this child in particular, if it had been that easy, we would have solved that problem way back when I was talking about travel and screens, like we would have solved the problem of the tantruming, the crying, like a year prior, but it wasn't
Right.
ever going to be that easy. And it was almost like a physiological need to release whatever pent
Yeah.
up tension there was. And then sure enough, she stops crying and she comes back over and she's, like pouting a little bit and says, I'm ready. Right. And then she can talk it out or whatever.
Right.
And then it like goes away. And then if you ask her at the end of the day how her day was, she'll tell you it was fabulous. She loved going to Disney World.
Right.
But you just had to know she was going to have a total meltdown at least once a day. And the only way to deal with it would be you need to
Have a little cry.
Have your
It's
space,
okay.
let it out. It's okay.
Have a cry.
You can't be right here at the dinner table because you're going to drive everybody else crazy.
Right, exactly. But you're allowed to feel emotion and you're allowed to cry, right? Just not right here. What I love about this story actually is something that you've said before, and you and I have independently come up with this parental mantra, which I find kind of sort of fascinating, is the expectation.
Mm-hmm.
Once you lower your expectation as a parent, or in your case, properly define the expectation, then when it happens, you're prepared for it, right? That is something that helps the parent not get their emotion raised,
Right.
right? Like to preemptive say she's gonna cry once a day, even though we're at Disney, the happiest place on earth. And that was your expectation. So when it happened, it didn't elevate your emotion because your expectations were appropriate.
Yes.
And honestly, if she didn't cry one day, she exceeded your expectations. So everybody's happy.
Totally. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean,
no, I think this is a perfect story to illustrate what the tantrum is like. And I think it kind of previews our second half of this episode where we talk about how we should deal with the tantrum.
Yes. Yeah. Do you have any stories that you can think of? I know you described what the tantrum.
Sure.
Like.
So, when you have your subsequent baby, the one who was the previous baby has now been displaced, right? It's a difficult time for the baby to not be the baby anymore.
Oh, totally. A lot of body training regression. There's a lot of obvious stress.
It's hard for them to, cope. Oftentimes they're toddlers, they're 2-3-year-olds, and there's just a lot going on emotionally. And I remember once I was in the nursery nursing the baby, just regular feed during the day. And my 2-year-old is crying for me, right? Like just needs me for some reason. And I just can't go, right? Like I'm literally locked in this chair nursing a baby. So, I'm calling to her, I'm telling her, come here, I'm right here. And, there's like an extended crying outside of my visual field, right? And then she finds her way to me. And, her face is puffy, tears all over her wet face. She has like snot and boogies running all down her mouth because she is just so emotional. And then she walks into the room and, of course, sees the baby, in my arms, the place where she's supposed to be, and just like loses it right there, right on the ground, right in front of us, just this full out tantrum. And, what am I going to do? I'm nursing the baby. So we just kind of watch it and it unfolds, but right in front of us.
Yeah.
But that's kind of what it's like that emotional, like myriad of things going through her mind. And then it like comes crumbling down when she sees that baby in my mom's arms, and she just needed a moment, and I wasn't going to do anything about it. And we were at home. So it wasn't like super embarrassing. And when they're really little and they're doing it, it kind of is a little bit cute and funny.
I totally agree. Actually.
Yeah, but you can't laugh at them, right? Like no laughing.
No.
You gotta take it very seriously. So that is my I guess my most vivid memory of a tantrum and how it unfolded. Whatever caused the initial crying, that I don't know, right?
Yeah. Yes. I definitely have moments with a couple in that young stage where I would just have to secretly get out the phone and video because it's just so adorable. And I knew that later they would laugh at it. And
and I think in the office, when it becomes like a problem, when people are asking the advice, it is if the tantrum continues, right? When they're 2 or they're, fine, kids tantrum. But, when we're nearing 4 4, 5, 8,
Yeah.
then parents are like, I think I might need some advice here. Like, how should I be handling this? Right.
Yes.
Okay, so why don't we move on to the second half to discuss the American Academy of Pediatric recommendations for our tantrums, and then our personal recommendations that we give, that we utilize ourselves and give to our patients in our practice.
So, Sylvia, why don't you start out by telling us, how do you advise patients when they come into the office and are really frustrated and having difficulty with tantrums?
Yeah, this is a common enough complaint that I actually have a kind of set speech and a list of recommendations that I give patients.
Oh, yes, yes. I want to hear it.
Right. So usually it's a stepwise process, which when parents, they're frustrated with their child that is tantruming. And, like in the gentle parent episode, it can lead to yelling. The parent is yelling at their child, like, why are you doing this? Right.
Yes.
And so, like, the thought of giving them advice is to kind of have a checklist. Like, when it happens, which they know it happens because it's a repetitive behavior, to kind of know what to do. And
Yeah.
sometimes having a behavioral plan in place helps reduce the emotion, because once things start escalating, the parents just default to the plan. And then maybe sometimes yelling doesn't ensue.
Yeah.
So the first thing I do when their child is having that temper tantrum, falling out, melting down, whatever you want to call it, allow your child to have emotion, right? To say, you don't tell them to stop crying, stop this. I advise verbalizing in words for your child how they are feeling. Sometimes it helps them understand what's going on. You can say something like, I can see that you're upset. I can see that you're very angry. You are mad. Just use the word to describe their emotion to help them process it in the future. Secondly, sometimes the tantrum is very disruptive to the rest of the family. It's during mealtime, or it's during a time where, you're trying to get other kids out the door. So what I recommend for parents that have this repetitive behavior is to create some sort of like calming space, whether or not it's a set of pillows in their room, their blanket, maybe a stuffed animal or something, or a light or a glowworm or something that causes them comfort, and just set up a separate space. I think technically speaking, this can be a timeout space, but I like to think of it as a comforting space. You verbalize their emotion for them, and then you allow them to have the emotion, but they can't have the emotion right, in your family space.
Yeah.
Like, go
Yeah.
to your comforting space, just like you with your child at Disney. Go sit on that grassy spot by the tree.
Yeah.
It's your space. And then, send them to that spot, not as a punishment, but as a place this is where you can freely have all the emotion that you want. Okay.
Yes.
And then the next step is tell them, when you send them there, when you're ready to come back, I'm right here for you, right? Like, to kind of be comforting in the future. And, in your story, you did this as well, that when she was ready to rejoin, she comes back and says, I'm ready, and then everybody's there to hug her and comfort her then, right? So allow them the space to have the emotion, and then come back into the family space, into your parents' arms for that comfort or hug or whatever.
Yeah.
If the child is older, then I do believe that Sarah Ockwell Smith's gentle parenting is correct, where then you discuss those emotions with your child at a later time, right? It really helps both calm the emotion from the parent. It allows a structure to not let temper tantrums take over the family dynamic.
Yep.
And then it also gives children the ability to process their emotions, and, like in your child, eventually be able to handle emotional things by themselves without a tantrum, right?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, the AAP does have some guidance on this. Some of the tricks that they suggest, which I also recommend, try it and see if it works, is see if some kind of distraction can take them away from the tantrum, right? Like, sometimes, in your child, if you just give them a sense of control, of providing acceptable choices instead of dictating what they're doing, like 2 choices, sometimes that can make a difference. Another good one that I see on here that I also agree with is, particularly with my children, I made much more of an effort to praise them when I saw that they were doing something really maturely and well, like a transition or not getting what they wanted or whatever, and they were handling it emotionally appropriately. One of the things on the AAP side is remove objects that are off limits or put them out of sight.
Right.
You can try all of these hacks, but like my child, like they are just going to have this emotional buildup that's going to be released this way.
Right.
And by far and large, it's just time that's going to take that away. Like they just need time to mature, time to heal, whatever it is, time.
So why don't we move on to some summary statements?
Sure. What have we got, Sylvia?
As parents, understand that children may have tantrums. Some children don't. But if your children do, that's still within the spectrum of normal.
Know your child, right? And plan and set your expectations accordingly. It's amazing how so much of our ability to remain calm as parents is just about having realistic expectations of how this or that scenario is going to play out with our child, right?
Come up with a plan as a parent, how to deal with tantrums. It could be as simple as distraction. It could be something that requires just a little bit of alone time to de-escalate. But, in that process of the tantrum, to try to help the child verbalize their emotions into words. And then after the tantrum, just make sure we're welcoming them back with support and affection.
I think some fun future topics off of this that we just hinted at, it would be certainly fun to talk about planning appropriate vacations for for you and your children, your family, what works for you and what doesn't. Of course, episodes on easing the introduction of a new sibling.
Yes.
Because that's certainly stressful for every child that goes through it.
No, I love it. This is 10 Kids, 2 Docs. I'm Dr. Sylvia Bank.
And I'm Dr. Vivian Carlin. We'll see you next time.
See you next time.
Thank you for listening to 10 Kids, 2 Docs, hosted and created by Sylvia Bank and Vivian Carlin. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and recommend our podcast to other listeners. Visit our website at 10kids2docs.com, where you can find links to social media and leave comments or suggestions. Back next week with more topics in parenting.